Mark Zuckerberg was essentially frog marched to Capitol Hill so that the senators, many of whom have no idea what the internet even is, could get their pound of flesh from Mark Zuckerberg over Facebook and Meta. It is very clear that people have used that platform for nefarious reasons. Let me talk personally about the issue, very personally about the issue. In 2016, as you know, I said I couldn't bring myself to vote for Trump in 2016. My kids were harassed because of my position. We had allowed our daughter at the time, she was young. She was about 10, 11 years old. And we set her up a private Instagram account. She didn't have a cell phone. This is important for you to know. She didn't have a cell phone per se, but we allowed her an Instagram account because she's a big Taylor Swift fan. She wanted to follow along. She wanted to interact with friends of hers whose parents let them have technology. So we didn't give her a cell phone, but she did have an iPad. And we set her up an Instagram account. It was private. It was locked. We monitored it, or at least we thought we were monitoring it enough. She didn't have TikTok at the time went around. There was Snapchat. She didn't have Snapchat, anything like that. She began to be bullied by kids over Instagram. Kids would send her messages. Nasty messages. They made fun of her looks, made fun of her most of all because of me, vilified her because of me. I mean, kids literally told my kid at a Christian private school, no less, that they couldn't be friends with her because their parents hated me because they disagreed with me and I was destroying the country. They began to push my kid to commit suicide. They began to bully my child and to try to convince my child, my oldest child, my daughter, they tried to convince my daughter to commit suicide because if she killed herself, I might see the light and change my mind on Donald Trump. They did that to her. These kids used Instagram and then the conversations at school as well to bully and harass my child and try to get her to kill herself. It's a true story. God bless my wife and kids, particularly my wife, because my kid was young at the time, that I didn't know the extent of it. They wanted to shelter me from it because they didn't want me to change my opinions or how I was doing things. They believed in what I was doing, and it's a terrible burden on my family what I do. I have the only two kids on the planet who get anxiety in an election year. Election years make my kids anxious after what they went through. My son was beat up on the playground for the same reason, because I didn't support Donald Trump. I want y'all to know something. Never once, not a single time, never did I blame Mark Zuckerberg because of what was happening on Instagram. Never once. I have never in my life blamed the owners of social media platforms for the awful things that people do on their platform because they're not the ones doing the bad thing. And it is remarkable to me to see a bunch of United States senators blast Mark Zuckerberg and demand he apologize to people because of the bad things happening on his platform. I demand that every single freaking United States senator stand up and apologize to the American public for the bad things happening in this country when they're the managers of it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Mark Zuckerberg needs to stand up and apologize to the American public because bad people did bad things on his platform, then by God, every United States senator needs to stand up and apologize for bad things happening on their platform called the United States of America on their watch, including the illegal immigrants coming over and the fentanyl crisis they have no desire to fix and every other problem under the sun in this country. They should stand up, face the public, and give an apology to. The audacity of them to make this man who has created jobs and wealth for a lot of Americans in their 401ks, that he should stand up and apologize because a bad person did something bad on his platform and they didn't preemptively stop it is absurd. You know who's responsible for it? The bad people. They're showboating this. Yes, there are problems with Meta. There are problems with Facebook. The algorithms are tweaked in such a way to keep you invested online and to put things into your view and purview that then you don't want to escape from. You want to see it. That's the way the algorithms work across all social media platforms. It's not just him, it's all of them. And you know what? If you continue down that road, it's on you. But what the United States Senate excels at is abdicating responsibility for themselves and every other person, including the parents of America, and picking one guy who happens to be fabulously wealthy that they can blame for everything because everybody hates the billionaires. So let's blame the billionaire instead of the parents for allowing their kids on social media. We got rid of our kid's account. But it was herself. She's the one who wanted to get rid of it. She had the smarts to do it. We've never given our kids Snapchat. We've never given our kids TikTok. We've never given our kids Facebook. They can be on Instagram, but they can't be on Facebook. Why Instagram? Because I find it to be the most civil of the social media platforms. They're not allowed on Twitter. You come to my house and our Wi-Fi blocks you from Snapchat and TikTok and Twitter. I never once blamed Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook or Meta or Instagram for the awful things people did to my kids because the fault lied with the awful people, not them. But the United States Senate, with all the crises in the world today, wants to drag the billionaire Silicon Valley people up and blame them for all the problems in the world instead of actually blaming the parents who gave unmonitored access to their kids to social media when they were too young to have it. They don't want to blame the bad people who are actually doing the human trafficking on the internet. You know, the algorithms continue to try to work, and they're not perfect. But they try to do a pretty good job of dealing with the situation. It's not great. It could be way better. But it's always a work in progress. And now they want to shut these websites down, or find ways to allow people to sue Mark Zuckerberg. And there are horrible situations. A kid who gave naked pictures to people who then turned around and blackmailed him, and he committed suicide and did it over the platforms. And the AI wasn't good enough to realize the sorts of pictures that were going over. You know, frankly, Apple, for example, wanted to be able to do this on its devices, and there was huge outrage that Apple would be doing this. And so Apple backed down from doing the very thing that the Senate says Facebook should be doing. Apple had the technology at play, but oh my gosh, the privacy concerns, how we can't do this. And even members of Congress were outraged Apple would spy on people doing exactly what Congress says Facebook should have to do. And Facebook does, and it's not a flawless process. There are problems. But how much more convenient it is to scapegoat one guy than to tell parents you're doing a terrible job parenting, because one guy is one vote and all the parents are a lot of votes. So by God, we better never lecture the parents about letting their kids be parented by device. No. We can't criticize the parents. We can't criticize the parents of the bullies who are doing the awful stuff to the other kids online. No, God forbid you do that. You know, every time I talk about what happened to my kid at the old school, the people who know what school it is get mad at me for bringing it up. I mean, how dare I tell you what awful people did to my kid at a church-run school because, oh my gosh, people might think poorly of that church school. So I should just keep my mouth shut, apparently. Yeah, we blame the school to a degree because we flagged the issue with school and they did absolutely nothing. We had to pull our kids out of that school. But there are new people. It's been time. I think there's a measure of guilt to people who hear me tell the story and realize how screwed up it was, and it was screwed up then, and they didn't do anything about it. It's not a blame. It's not an unwillingness to let it go. It's you should know the story. I never blamed Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook for the harassment my kid was getting over social media. We blamed the people who were doing it. And it's just asinine to me that our members of Congress want to frog march the guy in and blast him for what terrible people do on his platform when there are terrible people doing all sorts of things all across America. And these senators aren't willing to stand up as the senators of the United States of America and apologize for terrible people doing things across America. And many of the members of Congress are complicit in letting them doing it. Hello, members of Congress who are perfectly okay with the anti-Semites marching across college campuses. There are problems with Facebook and Meta. The algorithms are perhaps too addictive. People can't help themselves. There are people who use these platforms for nefarious ends. There are way more people using the platforms than there are employees at the platforms to monitor it all. They supplement with AI. It continues to get better. It's continued to be a work in progress. But it is absolutely absurd to me that you're going to make this guy or any of these other tech giants the bad guys when ultimately, at the end of the day, it's us. It's us. It's us as neglectful parents, bad people, sinners in the world, doing things that shouldn't be done on social media. The people who do those things, not necessarily you and me, but I'm sure you know plenty of parents who hand their kid a device and say, have at it, and never monitor it. They're the bad guys here. But God forbid the Senate call out the parents and tell them to do a better job. You can just scapegoat one guy in California and make him stand up and apologize to the America when it's really the United States Senate that should be doing that for wasting all of our times and refusing to secure a border while you've got all these illegal aliens coming across the border and undoubtedly agents of Iran, Hamas, China, and the rest. I mean, you want Zuckerberg to apologize? You people need to stand up and apologize to all of us and get the president to do the same thing. It's just absurd. The technology companies have provided good technology. What you do with it, that's on you. It's like making God apologize for putting the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden because Eve and Adam couldn't handle it themselves. I guess God needs to apologize as opposed to Adam and Eve.